Hi everyone, and welcome to IBTM Connect. My name is Shane Hannam, and I am the Portfolio Director for IBTM Events. Firstly, on behalf of the entire IBTM team, we want to thank you all for attending today's webinar and to pass on our thoughts to everybody who is continually affected by this exceptional situation. I would also like to record our thanks for the incredible contribution and sacrifices that are being made every single day by the army of health professionals, emergency services personnel, and volunteers from all over the world. To all of them, we say thank you. Our goal at IBTM is to keep this vital industry connected and inspired during these incredibly difficult times, which I'm sure is why so many of you are here today with us. Our speakers today are James Hitchin and Laura Capell-Abra. James is a member of the International Stress Management Association and the Federation of Drug and Alcohol Practitioners. He runs his own wellbeing and coaching consultancy, I Am James Wellbeing and Recovery, and he has been an event prof for the best part of 20 years and is also the General Manager of the Event Marketing Association. James works with individuals and organisations on stress prevention and improving their well-being. He supports those who want to recover from addiction and eating disorders, and he speaks in public, sharing his own story to inspire others. Laura is the founder of creative industry coaching company No More Ifs or Buts and workplace well-being company Stress Matters. She has worked in the marketing events industry for 17 years, having run businesses for the last 7 years. Using a mixture of personal stories, extracts from client experiences, and industry insights, Laura inspires her audiences to build their emotional intelligence and their self-awareness using her own experience of burnout as a relatable lesson for others to learn from. Thank you for being here today. Stay safe, and please join me in giving a very warm welcome to both James and Laura.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name's James. As you just heard, I am a wellbeing consultant. I'm also addiction and eating disorder recovery coach, and I use my own story to help others. I've had my own struggles with poor mental health, and a few years ago I suffered burnout, but it was more than that really, and had a mental breakdown, had to face my demons and face up to the fact that I was in fact struggling with my own addiction and eating disorder issues, and got some treatment and turned my life around, and now you find me here speaking to you guys via the wonders of technology. It's great to be here and talk to you today about improving your mental health. So that's me, and hello Laura, over to you.
Hi guys, so yeah, my name's Laura. I've been in the events industry quite a while now, but a good few years ago I stepped over to work with people in the events industry rather than organising events. That's about 12 years ago. I had what I now know was burnout. At the time I just thought I was being pretty emotional about things and I didn't really know what it was. That led me to quite a lot of self-reflection to seek out some support. I carried on back in the events industry because I loved it, and there was no part of me that wanted to stop doing that. When I went back in the events industry, I started running various agencies and found that even though I was what I'd consider quite a good people person and wanted my teams to feel relaxed, feel happy, enjoy their working environment, I still had team members going off on sick leave because of stress. And that didn't sit right with me, because for somebody that had been through something similar, to then find that I was helping create this environment where they were going off on stress leave as well, it just didn't sit right. So I wanted to do something about it. So 4 years ago, I left to set up a coaching, development and wellbeing organisation. And since then, it's all been about trying to help people in the events industry change the culture around how we approach things. So obviously we can't change what the events industry is. We can't change the deadlines, and actually we don't want to, because we really enjoy the pressure. But the problem that we find is when that pressure tips over into stress. So I set up a coaching firm called No More about 4 years ago, and I didn't initially start thinking about stress particularly because it wasn't really something that was being talked about. So I started working with clients, and they kept telling me in their coaching sessions about how actually it was the pressure, it was the stress, it was all the client demands that were causing them these issues. And I found that I was spending more and more of my coaching sessions discussing stress. So that's when we led to us thinking about what we could do to try and help the events industry when it came to stress. So I'm a big fan of data and about information, and so one of the first things we did was a piece of research into the industry, and that formed what our kind of first pillar is around insights. So we wanted to find out, beyond the basics of it's a high pressure industry, what was it was actually causing stress for all of our event professionals, and therefore most importantly, how could we help them in that situation. So we developed Stress Matters off the back of doing a piece of research into the industry and setting up a pledge scheme for the industry that was entirely based on the insights that we developed from that piece of research, and then subsequent research we've done since then where different pledges have been updated. So insights is really important to us. We want to make sure that what we're doing is for the events industry, for the people in the industry, and not only is that on an industry level, it's also on an organisational level. So we go into businesses and we do stress audits on companies to see where they are. But we also try and encourage people, as I said earlier, about actually trying to understand themselves a little bit more and having that self-awareness and emotional intelligence, so that insight into ourselves is really, really important as well. And the other two pillars that we have in Stress Matters is accountability and support. So accountability, as I mentioned, is fundamentally part of the pledge scheme. And the idea being that it's all really easy for us to say, yeah, we're going to look after ourselves. Yes, I'm going to look after my team better. I care about my team. I care about their well-being. Yes, sure, I'm going to make some changes. But unless you actually do, there's no point in saying it. So we're there to keep you guys accountable, to make sure that if you say you're going to make changes around the well-being of your team, that those changes actually happen. And then support-wise, we try and encourage everybody in the industry to support each other. So we have various themes such as a free support line, a confidential line that everybody can access. We'll give you the details on that later. A peer-to-peer support program called Buddies Matter, which again is a free program, and we'll provide you with the details for that at the end of the session. And then also lots of other support techniques as well, things like mental health first aider training and resilience workshops and things as well. But we also try and encourage people within organisations to support each other as well. So a key part of what we do is try and get people to think about how they can support somebody else that they're working with, but also at this time, who they're living with, who their kind of community is, whether or not that's friends, family, any religious groups, for example. So any communities that you're in, trying to see how you can support each other in what's quite a difficult time at the moment. So we have some polls for you today. So hopefully you guys will have discovered from attending some of these other sessions the different techniques that you can use. So today we're going to use polls. So you should find that underneath your screen. Now, there's also the option to put questions to us as well. So please, please, please do reach out. Give us any questions that you might have. What we will try and do is answer all of those at the end. So we'll try and make sure we have space for them at the end. So please pop them down when you think of them so you don't forget them, and we will go through them. But poll-wise, we're going to need your answers straight away. So if you're doing something else at the same time as this, please just take a minute or so just to answer the polls for us, because as I said, insights is really important to everything we do. So the first question is one of the most important questions. So the question is, how are you doing? So I'm going to say to you, James, how are you doing at the moment?
Well, it's a very good question, Nora. And as you said, I think it's a very important question. It's often the first question asked in a conversation. But how am I doing? Today, I am tired, actually. Lockdown has seemed really busy. Way busier than I was potentially anticipating, but who knew what it was going to be like, and so I'm tired and feel a bit run down today, but I'm content at the same time. But it's such an important question, right? It's quite often a question that, like, for example, at work we can be stressed and go, how are you doing, but not really listen to the answer because we might not be that fast. We're a little bit more focused on our own stress and things like that. But actually, it's such an important question to ask and then to listen to the answer.
Yeah, you're completely right. And one of the reasons we deliberately didn't put the word fine in the options for the answers is it's so often a word that we'll just say, yeah, I'm fine. And we do it as a real catch-all. And you're completely right. I think actually what we tend to do is ask the question to be polite, but we often don't listen to the answer. So that's why I wanted to start off with this question, because it's one of the most important questions we think you can ask yourselves each day, but also ask people that you are coming into contact with each day. And it's also one of those really nice ways to support other people. So just reaching out to people maybe you've not spoken to for a few days and just say, how are you doing? We have got lots of answers in, so thank you guys for completing the poll. And by a vast majority, we're doing okay but feeling a bit up and down. And I think that's not surprising at all. I think, yeah, we've not had anyone answer top of the world, which I put in there just because I wanted to be optimistic, but not surprised that nobody's put top of the world on there at the moment as well. And unfortunately, we have got some people that are more down than up and feeling pretty low. For those of you that are down on that end of the scale, as I said, we've got some support services that we'll talk about a little bit more later, so hopefully they will help you guys in particular. But it is a really tough time, and there are so many things going on that it absolutely is not surprising that everybody is feeling a little bit up and down at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's a really, sort of appropriate level of feeling, just because, you know, you can listen to the news and it's just can be a bit doom and gloom, and there's a lot of, everything is sort of about COVID-19 and uncertainty and all of that sort of stuff. And so I think, you know, and you'll hear it quite a lot, and probably have heard it quite a lot, you know, sort of take it one day at a time, just because we just have no idea. And the only thing, you know, we only have control over the things we actually have control over, and it's just trying to sort of to focus on those and let go of the rest in a way.
It is. I mean, the word that we've all heard a lot about, or word used a lot recently, is unprecedented. It's definitely probably become one of the most overused words recently, but it's completely true. It's not something any of us have ever experienced before. So, you know, I've got a few different words here of things that you guys might be feeling right now. So, James, another question for you. How has it been for you being in this kind of pandemic crisis situation?
I'm going to use all of those words. I'm going to use all of those words. Unprecedented, weird, interesting, terrifying. Has it been terrifying? It's not been terrifying, but there's definitely some fear of the unknown. Confusing, and actually, it's definitely been a bit crap at times as well. All of them, and I can sometimes feel fine about it all, and other times feel, on the other end, feel really rubbish about it. And so, but there's so many unknowns, and I think many people, me included, struggle sometimes with the unknowns. I think event professionals hate unknowns because we're always trying to plan for the unknown. So, you know, whatever the curveball is, and so this is it's a challenging time.
It is challenging. I was talking to somebody the other day who was telling me about how a couple of weeks ago they'd been constantly feeling ill, and they were getting really bad stomach pains, and they were starting to worry about whether or not they had COVID, and they just felt a bit strange and a bit kind of uncomfortable about everything. They didn't quite know what was going on. And as we were talking a little bit more, we realised that actually what they'd been feeling was anxiety. So anxiety is something which we each have every single day. Some of us will have more extreme levels of anxiety. And sometimes it can be really debilitating, and that's when it becomes an anxiety disorder. But actually we all have a level of anxiety every day, but it's situations like this that cause high stress that mean our anxiety level is likely to be a lot higher. And for some people that might be a feeling of sick. For me, it's a kind of butterfly type sensation. It's kind of a bit of a fluttering, and I can feel my heart rate racing. And everybody will have a slightly different experience of how it physically manifests itself, as well as mentally. So one of the really important things we have to think about at the moment is how are we going to cope with all of these things that are going on around us. So it's one of those things that I said, because, you know, those unprecedented, difficult, weird words that we've been using, actually we probably don't know quite how to deal with it, and that's really, really scary, as you're saying, James, with the fact that, you know, if we're event people, we like to know what's going on. Our entire focus is about making sure we've ticked all the boxes and we've thought about every potential contingency plan. So this throws us into a slightly uncomfortable situation at the moment. So when we think about coping strategies, we quite often don't call them coping strategies. We might just be told, it just makes me feel a little bit better when I go and get some fresh air. And that's great. It doesn't matter what you call them, but that's what they are. They're coping strategies. They're things that you do that will help you in the moment or generally with your stress levels. And what that does is it helps to build up our resilience. And resilience is our ability to, well, they say it's our ability to bounce back. I actually think it's hopefully the ability to bounce forward rather than back to that same position and say, actually, you know what, by that point, something's happened that's going to probably change you slightly. So actually, we want to just be bouncing forward rather than back to the same position, because that position might not exist anymore. But the idea is that you can move on from something rather than getting frozen into the situation. So, James, what kind of things do you do coping strategy-wise?
Well, I tell you what I'm not going to do, and I'm not going to bang my head there, where like it says on the picture. Well, I think, as you and I have discussed on many an occasion, Laura, there are positive coping strategies and negative coping strategies. The coping strategies I try and employ these days are positive, and some of them can be really simple, and I think, you know, different things work for different people, and I'd be really interested to hear from anyone who's listening to this what sort of things they do, be it either positive or negative. But for things for me that work, trying to get enough sleep. I talk about sleep all the time. When I'm stressed, sleeping can be a bit more challenging, but sleep is so important to try and rest. Is so important, because that's when sort of the body fixes itself, processes all of the things that are going on in our brain and all of that sort of stuff. And so trying to get sleep is really important to me. Trying to be mindful, staying present rather than being future focused or past focused, that's where I get super stressed out. And I can only do what I'm doing right now. I can't do anything about tomorrow, really, because I'm not in tomorrow yet. And I try and stay focused by breathing, really simple breathing exercises if I'm sort of short on time, or I will try and meditate or do something mindful, which could be a meditation, or it could be sitting outside. I love just to sit outside. I'm fortunate I live in the countryside, so especially last week when the sun was shining, you know, take half an hour outside just to sit and listen to what's going on in the world around me. But there's so many things that you can do. Other things I do on a regular basis are I sort of share gratitude with what's going, you know, and even when things are crappy, I've still got, you know, ultimately I've still got a really good life, and gratitude is a really helpful way to help lift mood and reduce stress, and gratitude actually changes, by expressing gratitude regularly, it changes your neural pathways, which is why it helps lift mood. And exercise. Exercise is important. I mean, I'm not like a gym. Well, you can't go to a gym at the moment anyway, but I like to walk. I like to do yoga, and just get outside a little bit. And actually, sometimes I like to do absolutely nothing. So
wow, we're going to talk about rest in a minute, but some of the things you mentioned there. Hopefully there are things that the people listening might find that they do. So you're trying to think here about things that actually just make you feel a little bit more positive when you do them. And we're going to talk about different environments like work, rest and play. But actually one of the things we're doing when we're thinking about well-being generally, whether or not that's in your work, rest or play environment, it's around breaking it down into physical, mental, emotional and spiritual. Mm-hmm. And what we quite often do is we'll try and focus on our physical health, for example. So like you said there, James, it'll be things like walking, or I am a very rubbish runner, but I try to run. It's just kind of general exercise, but sleep being a really important one for physical as well. So you've got the physical ones. And most people will be aware of something that they do physically that they know is good for them. Quite a lot of you will probably do something around mental without really knowing that it fits into that category. So whether or not that's meditation, like you, James, whether or not it's simply reading or doing a puzzle, for example. I'm a big fan of a jigsaw with my 78-year-old grandparent head on. I love a good jigsaw, and they come back in fashion now. So they can really help with your mental well-being. Now, the two which we don't often think about fulfilling, but actually we do find satisfaction in when we do them, are things like emotional. So you mentioned there gratitude, just showing gratitude, whether or not it's something you write down or whether or not it's something you tell somebody else. So my husband and I, every evening over dinner, we share one thing that we are grateful for that day. So at the moment, you know, it's things like our health, our family's health, being able to take the walk outside, for example. They don't have to be, you know, grand wins of the day. They can be the smallest of things, like, actually, I'm really grateful that I can hear birds sing, for example. But something that gave you that kind of joy in that moment. Other things like breathing exercises can help you, and deep breathing can really help you focus your emotional well-being. And then on to spiritual well-being. It's kind of thinking about the connections with other people. So I imagine a lot of you, if you're anything like me, have spent a lot of time recently on Zoom and House Party and WebEx and all the different platforms, WhatsApp, Facebook, talking to so many friends and family members, which has been lovely. Sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming, but it's lovely, and it's that sense of spiritual connection with people. So for some people, spiritual is a religious thing, it's praying, but it doesn't have to be. Actually, I'm not religious, but my spiritual well-being comes from my friendships with people, my involvement in clubs. So for me, actually, being part of the events industry is actually is kind of a club. It's part of something. So actually, that gives me a sense of well-being as being part of a group of like-minded people. So there are kind of 4 different areas when you're thinking about your well-being and the coping strategies that you might use to try and think about, have you got something from each one of those 4 that might be able to help you?
Laura, just actually on the spiritual, on the connection side of things, and I think that especially now more than ever, connection is so important. And in fact, in the last couple of days, you know, I was speaking with a colleague last night who's had a friend who was on the phone to him, and she's really struggling with the lockdown, being isolated, being on her own, and was in a really, really bad way. And I think that is something that I think we can sometimes forget that actually human beings, we're sort of, for the majority of humanity, we're designed to be social beings. You know, we were, you know, way back when in the days of the caveman, we were, you know, we lived in tribes, and we worked to help each other and the tribe to survive. So we are, on some level, sort of, we have a need for that human connection. And so trying to stay connected whatever way one can, like whether it is Zoom, which can be tiring after doing 1 million Zoom meetings, but trying to stay connected, be it via Zoom, via message, via phone call. If you've got no one you want a phone, support line, which we'll talk about, I know you'll talk about in a bit. But the connection piece is so important, because loneliness, outside of the context of COVID-19, loneliness is such a burden for people. And you know, just if people are feeling alone, please reach out, please utilize the support line we'll tell you about, and a few other things. But loneliness and trying to sort of nourish the need for connection is, I think, currently really important.
Yeah, completely. Ever so more than normally as well, is actually just making sure that you feel part of whatever community, whatever group that sits well with you. So thinking about your workplace, now I appreciate some of you are probably frantically working, probably doing a lot more hours than you ever had before, but some of you may well be furloughed, so have a slightly uncomfortable kind of relationship with that idea of work at the moment. Some of you might be loving furlough and see it as a great opportunity for a holiday, and some people I know are really struggling with the fact that they're not there helping the business through it. But you've also got a lot of you that I'm sure are freelancers or independents, or unfortunately just don't have a role at the moment, full stop. So work-wise, we're we've got to really understand our relationship with work at the moment and what we're trying to get from it, because obviously the kind of the practical things about being busy and having finances, some of that's out of our control right now. And as James mentioned earlier, what we really need to focus on for our mental health and well-being are the things that we can control. Now, we can't control the pandemic, unfortunately. None of us are quite skilled enough to do that. What we can do is influence whether or not we have a busy day, whether or not we are making connections with people about future work, for example, whether or not we are staying in contact with people. But what we can completely control, even though it's a hard thing to do, but what we can control is how we feel and think about it. So if we sit here thinking this is a really, really negative time, what a catastrophe that we're living in right now, we're going to start to breed that negativity in everything we do, and we're going to always see the negative things. And it's essentially something called a confirmation bias, that we don't like to be wrong as people. So if we wake up in the morning and we're having a bad morning, you know, and that whole thing about getting out of bed the wrong side, when you get out of the bed the wrong side, everything that day feels negative. And everything around you will just be like, oh, I knew that was going to happen because I'm having a bad day. But when you get out of bed and you spring out of bed and you have a great morning, you always see the positive things that day. And that day always seems even better than it probably would have done. And it's something called confirmation bias, where we look for the negatives or we look for the positives. So it's a real small language shift that if we can think about, we talk quite a lot about looking for the opportunity, and we run a webinar called Thrive Not Survive, and we can go into this thinking we've just got to get through it, and we do. We obviously all have to just get through this as well, but actually if we go into this thinking this could be an opportunity, it came about because of a difficult situation, but what opportunity is this giving me? It's a different mindset, and that can have a really big important part in how we approach things. So what we want to think about now, what we want to understand now, is a little bit around thinking about work. So James, tell me a little bit about what kind of workplace well-being means to you. So thinking about those kind of physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. Now, obviously, some of those are going to be tougher because physically we're not kind of there, not in an office as such anymore. But tell me about what workplace well-being means to you.
Well, I think workplace well-being, in general terms, I believe we all have a right to live well. Now, ultimately, that's our choice. So some people may go, I don't want to live well, and not do things that may be beneficial to their mental health and their physical well-being. But we all have a right to live well. And the other thing I would say about well-being is not just a thing we do at night or at the weekends. Well-being is it's sort of an active state of being. And so part of workplace well-being is work providing you a platform to live well. And that could look like a number of different things in different companies and all of those sorts of things. And, you know, you hear from things like, you know, the nice to have, like smoothie days and all of that, but we're not in that context at the moment. But workplace well-being, it's very much, I don't know, it's about, you know, so if there's certain things that you do in daily life that, you know, help you, like this, that's meditation or breathing, it's like still do that at work. You might not want to do it for as long or things like that, but I know for me, if I'm feeling stressed and I'm trying to work on a document or whatever it is, I can just stepping back even for 1 minute and breathing massively changes my perception of what I'm doing. Because we can quite often, if we're busy and when we're busy and feeling under pressure, we can feel stressed. We can just be we can feel like everything's on top of us. And by giving ourselves a little bit of space, but living well and happens at, well, as it says on that slide, it happens at work, at rest and at play, and work is no different. And so there's responsibility on ourselves to want to live well, but there's also responsibility from our business leaders to help us do that. On its most basic level, it starts with communication, I think, really, and culture. And then it's what you can do as an individual and as a team. I mean, different people work in different ways. Are they, you know, if you're a freelancer, you'll be working in a very different environment to if you're in a big agency or corporate company. I've given a really woolly answer, but I mean, because there's no one thing really, is there, Laura, as we know, and different companies do things differently. But ultimately, I think well-being at work is actually a cultural thing. It's not just fruit bowls and smoothie days and yoga classes. It's way deeper than that. And even in this time of COVID, if people are furloughed or not, or if they are still working, things like check-ins that aren't necessarily work-related, that are just how are you doing type check-ins, back to our first question. There are all sorts of things. I know companies, for example, that they do once a week, they do a team workout via Zoom. That would horrify me. I wouldn't want anyone to see me on a screen doing my workout. But there's loads of different things you can do, but well-being doesn't stop because of COVID. We just have to adapt it. And again, well-being is something, like I said, it's an active state of being. It's not a passive state. If you're just sitting hating on the world, nothing will change. But we do have power ourselves to do certain things. And like I said, we need our organizations to support us in those. It's not all on the organization. It's a two-way street. It's a top-down, bottom-up type approach.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've got a poll now for you guys, because we'd like to know about whether or not your workplace supports your well-being. So as James said there are there's more than anything, still a duty of care for your workplace to support your well-being, regardless of whether or not you're in the physical office or not. As I said, I appreciate some people on the call might not have a kind of working have an employer as such at the moment, so please feel free to kind of step out this poll if you need to, but we'd love to hear your thoughts for those of you that are still working or potentially have been furloughed, because even if you're furloughed, there is still a responsibility from your company to look out for you, kind of your mental health and your physical health as well. So they're looking out for your well-being, or hopefully they are. So we'll just wait for a few more people to respond on this. But one of the things that we found in our insights report that we run every couple of years into the events industry, last year we had some really positive feedback, which was that 45% of those people that responded had said that they'd seen some kind of action by their workplace to implement wellbeing practices. Now, for me, that's massively positive, because that was a change by 45%. We hadn't asked the question the year before, but we know that the way the wording of the question was in the last year. So for us, that's a really, really impressive and really pleasing thing for the events industry, that we're finally starting to take our most important assets more seriously. And as James said, that will go from things like that scale will go from the real basics of putting more fruit rather than chocolate in an office, but actually hopefully that goes to the strategic level of making a change now. So we're let's have a look at the poll results. Really mixed bag here, so really interesting to see. We've got 25% of you said, yep, you've got a wellbeing strategy that is being implemented, which is brilliant. And as I said, there's going to be lots of people, hopefully, that even if it wasn't there last year, it's now happening, which is great. And we'd like to see that, obviously, that trend continuing going forward as well. 16% of people have a wellbeing strategy, but isn't always top priority. And I get it, I understand that when we're working with companies to talk about their wellbeing, it's a real culture shift, as James said, that we have to really work really closely with the ops managers, the HR managers, the business leaders, whatever kind of size organisation that title equates to, actually thinking about it's not necessarily a strategy on its own, it's a priority. It's about a cultural approach to situations. So having a wellbeing strategy is super important, but actually it's about tweaking that culture so it doesn't become something that can become a high priority or low priority. It's just the way that your company operates, what your values are. A few of you, unfortunately, have got no, not at all. So that's something that potentially can be looked at in terms of how your employers can implement a wellbeing approach. Don't do anything from top down, but do some, the team try to take action. That's great. I mean, that is such a good starting point, and well done you guys for trying to make something happen moving forward. And it's that thing, we know from our research, from our insights and our experience that top down has the most impact. Because obviously you can have that kind of trickle-down effect through each thing, whether or not that's the finance, through the processes, through the actual communication processes within the organisation. But actually, if your leaders aren't on board with that yet, and you as a team can make improve people's well-being, then that's such a positive thing to do. So well done for doing that. So
Laura,
a real mix.
Laura, just quickly on that, I think if there are companies where the leaders, the business leaders, are not on board, because some of them, you know, they may be of a generation where they just don't get it, or they think it's rubbish, or whatever. They'll have their opinions. Ultimately, I would suggest approaching them with it as a business case rather than this sort of lovely conceptual idea, but actually as a business case, because, I mean, ultimately, and there are plenty of facts and figures out there to prove this, that a company with well-being at its core, with a culture of well-being, is happier, it's more productive, and ultimately, as far as the CFO is concerned, it's more profitable. And so it's using language they understand to show them why it's important to look after their most important assets, and that's the people.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do actually have some, we're offering 50% off the pledge scheme at the moment, which is a structure. So if anybody is interested in putting that in, then let us know, because we can help you word that in an appropriate way for the powers that be. So moving on to rest, I found, I discovered a book a while ago, which I think is absolutely brilliant, called The Art of Rest by Claudia Hammond. And it's essentially the findings of a report, because I said I do love a bit of data, on something called the REST test, which was a 2016, I think it was, study, the global study of over 18,000 people. And what they did in this was ask people about rest, what it meant to them, and what it is that they do to rest. Because we've all had the saying, work hard, play hard, and that's definitely a philosophy that I've always had in my events career. I was always the first and last one out the bar. I was always the one to, you know, be proud of the fact I only had 3 hours sleep, and I cracked on with yet another day on site, and that used to just become part of who I was. That was part of my brand, I guess. And actually, that rest bit doesn't come into play there. So work hard, play hard. We never talk about resting hard. And it's one of those things that actually, by us resting, we're resetting our body and our mind. And so it's a really, really important thing. But it does matter what kind of rest it is, because there will be people that might have been very ill that in theory have been told to rest. Now that's not the same as active resting. And actually we're not going to get the same benefit from that mentally as we would if we're choosing to rest. So James, I'm going to ask you in a minute how what you do to rest while we're asking everybody else. But the things that we're going to put in the poll for you in a moment are some of the top 10 things from the global study that was conducted by Claudia Hammond and the team into what people choose to use as rest. And there are things in there that I appreciate that I think we've got 4 out of the top 10, so there's definitely some that are missing out there from you. So we'd love to know on the Q&A or the feedback, tell us what it is that you guys do to rest as well. So tell us what you do, but whilst you're all voting, James, tell me a little bit about what you do to rest.
I'd love to say that I do reading, but I don't. I'm a terrible. In fact, when I am relaxed, that's funny that I'm capable of reading, but only when I'm totally relaxed, like if I'm on holiday. Otherwise, I can't. I've struggled to do that. I can't concentrate. But spending time in nature, looking at your list, spending time alone, I find solitude, not isolation, but solitude, very important for me. Listening to music, I sometimes literally do nothing, and I'm very satisfied with being a bit idle. Because I need to sort of reset and recharge. And also, rest for me, as well as just sort of taking some time out, is I go back to sleep, because that's when we're asleep. Our bodies are driven by rhythms, circadian rhythms. It's not just in sleep, but and there's so much study now done around circadian rhythms. And when we sleep, our rhythm is reset, because throughout the day, we are stimulated massively by the outside world, and so being able to sleep, calm down, and reset and start again is very, very, very important, both for our mental and physical health. And like you were sort of talking about, Laura, about the work hard, play hard. Obviously, not that they use these interrogation techniques anymore in the world, apparently, but sleep deprivation was a form of torture for a reason, because it was absolutely crippling mentally. So when we are not sleeping, it really does have a negative effect on our memory and our mood, and it has an effect, actually, it also has an effect on our physical well-being as well. It's not great for, ultimately, it can be a driver of other illness and other disease. So sleeping, I love sleeping.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. So a lot of you have voted now, which is great. Thank you. We are looking at a pretty even split. Spending time in nature has just popped out in front. But the other three of reading, wanting to be alone and listening to music, all near enough tied. So reading is actually came out as #1 in the rest test. Spending time in nature, #2. Wanting to be alone in #3, and listening to music as #4 as the top 10 in the rest test. Now, I think there might be a sense of actually spending time in nature at the moment is even more important for rest because we're so kind of housebound at the moment. So I would be intrigued with my little data insight hat on to wonder whether or not that is something that you guys all do when you are out and about all the time, or whether or not that's something that's just skewed slightly because it is so much more restful to be out in nature. Even if you just go onto the grass, if you have grass near you in the garden or out and about near you, and just putting bare feet on grass, probably not today where it's raining, but when it's dry, actually gives you a real sense of grounding and connection to the environment around you. And I think it can be really, really positive having that moment and listening to what you can hear around you as well. But actually, surprisingly for some, watching TV came out in the top 10 of the rest test as well. TV tends to get a really bad rep for, killing our brain cells and making us get square eyes, if you listen to my mum from when I was a kid. So it tends to get a really bad reputation, but actually that's more to do with the physical impact of watching TV rather than the mental side. So people that are experiencing low moods actually see an improvement in their mental well-being after watching TV because it allows them a little bit of escapism. So quite often when we think about the negatives of TV, we actually tend to think more about we talk about more about the physical negatives connected with watching TV in terms of not moving. Okay, brilliant. So
just quickly, sorry, on the TV point, I love to watch TV. I mean, when I get the time, I've become a complete binge watcher on various streaming platforms. But actually, it's like you just said, Laura. It's a great distraction, especially if you're going through difficult things. Sort of something that's not too difficult to watch can be a really good way of just relieving any mental pressure you're feeling. And in fact, it's something I advised the client to do last night. Just go and watch the crappiest TV you can to take your mind off what was on their mind. Anyway, I'll let you crack on. Sorry.
Brilliant. Thank you. So thinking about play then, I'm conscious of time, so we're gonna quickly go through play. And there's a great quote I love by George Bernard Shaw, which is we don't stop playing because we get old because we stop playing. And I think it's a lovely quote because we can all think about when we were kids, we probably all played a lot, but actually it's not something we do quite so much as adults, and particularly thinking about it in terms of the work environment. We kind of mentioned about gimmicky things earlier, and you'll kind of all know, and you might have it in your offices when you're back in the offices, those things like ping pong tables that feel like a great gimmick brought over from the likes of Facebook and Google's and all of that. But actually there was a real serious set of data behind that talks about how when we get to play, it really it reduces stress, it improves our ability to problem solve, it improves our creativity and innovation, but it also helps with our emotional intelligence and collaborating with other people. So that playing aspect is a really important part of our day-to-day and our approach to well-being, but it's something we don't often do. So I want to know, when was the last time you played? So James, tell me while everybody else is voting, when was the last time you played, and what did you used to play as a child?
Well, I used to do a lot of like imaginary stuff. As kids do, either on my own. I was an only child, so I would do a lot on my own when I was at home. Or actually, the thing I used to play when I was a kid was Batman and Robin with a friend of mine in the playground. but I always ended up being Robin, which just upset me. I always wanted to be Batman. But the last time I played, being truthful, actually was a couple of weeks ago when I saw my children, because of lockdown, they live with their mum, and because of lockdown, I'm not seeing them as much as I would normally. But when I see them, it's all about what they want to do. And, you know, I mean, if my daughter wants to play princesses, then I'll be a princess, and all that sort of stuff. And if my son wants to ride me like a horse on, you know, on my back, then, you know, whatever. It's all about playing, because I think that's really, it's very liberating, actually. But I could definitely incorporate more play and more just sort of light-hearted things into my life. Because they're very good for so many things, sort of just stimulating our minds, helping boost creativity, mood, and it can be quite a drain being sort of a full-on grown-up worrying about the stresses and strains of life all the time.
Absolutely. Well, I am so pleased to see that more than 10% of you, 13% of you currently, play today, which I love. And I'd love to know whether or not those people are people with children, or they've just gone proactively and played, whether or not it's gaming or play something practical yourselves. But nearly half of you within the last couple of weeks, so that's doing pretty well. For those near 20% of you that can't remember when, got a good piece of homework for you is think about what you used to play when you were a child, and think about what a version of that could be in your adult life, and go and do it. So try and implement a little bit more play into your day, try and improve your well-being.
So I'd say actually play could be, so like, you know, like when you're a kid, you do drawing and painting and all of those things. You know, you get loads of, you know, sort of mindful drawing. So you're ticking off, you're doing something that can be a bit fun, colourful, stimulating, but mindful at the same time. I mean, that could sort of fall into the play category, because it's just doing something a bit different. And if you like drawing, that is. I mean, I'm not very good at anything but stickmen, but there are lots of other things out there that can just take you away from that sort of the mundane daily routine, which can sometimes be a bit mundane, especially in this sort of COVID-19 situation we find ourselves in.
Absolutely. So one of the last things we wanted to introduce you to was a concept called be-do balance. So a lot of you will be familiar with the idea of work-life balance, and it's something that has been around for a long time. And if you guys are anything like me, the idea of work-life balance in the events industry feels pretty challenging to achieve. So what's one of the reasons we really like this concept around be-do balance, and what that comes down to is thinking about if any of you guys have ever experienced a sense of flow. And what that is when you kind of really get into the zone of doing something. So time just passes, you seem to be really productive, whether or not that's work or whether or not that's a kind of a leisure activity. But be-do focuses on what you're being and what you're doing. And for some people, being can be very, very quiet, very kind of solitary tasks. And for other people, something like reading that one person might consider as a being activity, another person might consider reading as something that they do, because they have to put that bit more concentration in it for them. So it really comes down to trying to think about what your be-do balance would look like. So for you, what kind of things would you put into your doing category, and what kind of things would you put into your being category? So I know, for example, that I love my job. So quite often I don't really see my job as doing, it just becomes part of who I am. So when people say, oh, you need a better work-life balance because you've worked however many hours that day or that week, actually quite often, sometimes that's true, but quite often it doesn't feel like that for me, because actually I've got a sense of being that I get from the work that I do. And so there's other things that I get my doing balance from. So it's just a kind of a concept that we wanted to put in front of you guys today, just to get you to have a little think about how we quite often think about this concept of work-life balance, but it doesn't feel that appropriate for us anymore. It feels like maybe actually the time has passed, the lines are a bit blurred, particularly at the moment where our boundaries are ever more blurred because of working and playing and resting all in the same place. That idea of be-do, that kind of work-life balance 2.0, might be something worth you guys thinking a little bit about.
Laura,
now, I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to move past a couple of slides, everybody. So apologise, they're actually polls, so don't you worry. We're just going to jump straight on to Buddies Matter. Just to talk about the fact that we mentioned it before, but there's a program called Buddies Matter that's free for everybody in the events industry to join. It takes 1 minute to sign up. You can go onto buddiesmatter.com, or the links there, stressmatters.org.uk/buddiesmatter. And the idea is it's a peer-to-peer matching program for people in the events industry. So actually what we do is we match you to somebody else in the events industry, and you can act as each other's support buddy. With the idea being that question we asked right at the beginning about how are you doing is something maybe you can ask that support buddy every so often.
I love this concept, Laura. Buddies Matter, it's great. It's great.
James is one of our buddies, which is great. We've also actually launched Buddies Matter in America as well. So if we've got anybody on the call in places other than the UK, then don't feel like you can't get involved. We have got people internationally on the Buddies Matter program as well. So to summarise before we go into questions, I have a little think over the next minute or so if you've got any questions for us, because we are just going to wrap up and then we're going to take some of your questions. I know a few questions are coming already. So try and think about this opportunity, this time at the moment as an opportunity rather than something that we just need to get through. Think about what your be-do balance might be. Try and think about what your new normal is. We're not going to be going back to the world we used to have. It's going to be different. So actually we need to try and reset what it is we want that to look like. And then some practical things for you as well. Follow us on social media and LinkedIn and co, because actually you've got loads of stress management tips and things on there that hopefully you guys will benefit for. And sign up to Buddies Matter, and we'll just take out the support line as well. So on the screen now you've got a number which you guys can text, WhatsApp or call at any time between, at the moment, between 8 AM and 8 PM UK time. We are hoping to get that extended as we get more volunteers, because it's run by volunteers in the events industry who are all mental health first aid trained. So they're all trained to listen non-judgmentally. Everybody has agreed that it's a confidential service, no names are provided, and the only time we reference things that have been mentioned is when we're trying to get access to more information to help with those individuals. So we'll do a lot of signposting, so we might provide you details to other services that we might find, we think you might find beneficial. So please, if you are feeling low, reach out to the support line. It is for the events industry, it is for you guys. Buddies Matter program, as we said, and then James and I are more than happy for you guys to reach out to us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Laura, I know you run a couple of webinars a week, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we run one on Tuesday called Thrive Not Survive, and one on a Thursday called Navigating the 7 C's of a Crisis. And tomorrow we are talking about the C of challenge, and we've got Frank Wainwright from Frank Publishing on the webinar with us.
And actually, likewise, I also run a weekly wellbeing webcast on a Wednesday. So I've got one tonight at 6 PM. It's free to join up. Tonight we're discussing nutrition and balance, actually, following on from today's theme. And also I am offering, if anyone's interested, free sort of chat/coaching sessions during this time, just to support people, because I know it's really difficult for some people. So you can get hold of me via my email, which is on the screen, my social. And if you want details for tonight's webcast, email me or find me on LinkedIn. Questions?
Yeah, so we've got a question come through, which is, do you think there's a link between wellbeing and performance? And I would say absolutely yes, and there is the data to prove it. So there is, in terms of performance, if you think about it, if you're an athlete, in terms of that physical performance and that mental performance in that environment, you would do training, you would look after your body, you would exercise, you would practice, you would train, and that would improve your performance. And it's exactly the same in work, which is what I'm assuming you're leading to in that question, is the performance at work is improved by an improvement in well-being. So if that's something you need to go back to somebody and say, can we focus on our well-being, please? It'll improve our productivity and our performance. Let us know, because we've got lots of examples of data that can help with that.
Yeah. Laura, I was just going to add to that, actually, on an individual level, yes, just like you said, and also on a company level, if your well-being is not great and you may need to take time off sick, that's the cost to the business, and you'll know the figures better than I, Laura, but at last count, it was over £1,100 per employee, per employer, per year for sort of people off sick with mental health issues, wasn't it? It was a really big figure.
Yeah. It can be a huge figure. One of the things we do in our workshops, which I love to do, but is always a quite terrifying number for people to hear, is we list off all the impacts of stress. So exactly that, things like not being actually even at work because you're poorly, but also missed deadlines, having to reprint things, career things because you've missed the deadline because of being too rushed, for example. There's so many hidden costs, and we get people to work out what the cost of stress is from them to their team and organisation, and that number can be pretty scary sometimes. So we've got another question here about, you mentioned meditation several times. Can you tell us how you would recommend starting meditation? What tips would you give for a beginner? So James, that might be a good one for you to answer.
Well, what tips for a beginner? I mean, I think sometimes the word meditation can have a lot of stigma, and people think, oh, I can't do it. And it's all about, and you sort of mentioned this earlier, Laura, in terms of approaching anything well-being, it's small, achievable steps and small, achievable goals. So just starting with 30 seconds, 1 minute, which doesn't sound like a lot, but sometimes it can be if you've got a busy head. There's loads of fantastic online tools out there, from Headspace and Calm apps. There's another great app I use all the time called Insight Timer, and Insight Timer's got meditations from people all over the world, and it's everything that's from beginners upwards. But ultimately, just sitting on your own for a short space of time. You don't necessarily have to be in a meditative practice, but just start by spending a little bit of time on your own and just acknowledging the thoughts that are coming into your head and then letting them go. It doesn't have to be anything more complicated than that.
Good. If you're a visual type person, one of the things that I think can work really well is exactly what James said about thinking about whatever it is you're thinking about, and imagining yourself holding a bunch of helium balloons, and each time you think about a particular thing, imagine it being on a balloon and then letting that balloon go, and so you can then focus about what else is left in your hand. So if you're a visual kind of person, that kind of thing, or imagining the things that are going around your head on clouds and then going across your vision of the sky is another way of doing it. So there's lots of different options. There's a book that I read recently which I thought was really good called Stress Less, Accomplish More, and it referenced something called the Ziva technique in there, which is a combination between meditation, mindfulness and manifestation as well, so that's a good one. I've got another question here of how do you make your team feel valued? So
Laura,
that's
one for you, yeah, definitely one for you.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a good one. So in that sense, it's really thinking about what the drivers are for your team. So we kind of touched on it before, but what's important to your team, and knowing what's important to them will make them feel valued. So if you know your team members, for example, there'll be some team members that are really focused on money. They'll be really driven by money. There'll be other people that are less driven by money, but actually really driven by time off, for example. Maybe they're the kind of people that love holidays. And you'll get other people that are really, really family focused, and that's really important to them, so that's a driver for them as well. So by taking the time to understand your team members and understand what they value and understand what drives them, means that actually you can have a deeper connection with them and make them feel valued, because one, you're taking the time to listen to them, but also when you come down to thinking about things like reward and recognition, actually connecting reward and recognition back to what they value most importantly shows that you're listening to them. Now there's loads of kind of basic things, but I would always say think about what's relevant for those people rather than do something that's overly catch-all. I mean, there's loads of things like actually making sure that they feel like they're being heard. Some people, a lot of people want to be heard. They want to feel like that they can put their hand up and say, I'm not happy, or I've got a great idea, whatever it is. some people still don't actually like doing that. They like knowing that that's an option, but they would never take you up on that. And that, again, is down to that person's personality. So getting people to feel valued is very much about kind of a change in culture, just a little tweak for a lot of companies, to actually treat people as individuals and understand that person and what they value, and that's how you can make that person feel valued. So hopefully that answers that question. We've got one more here, so please fire through any final questions you've got, and if you have, if we don't have time, then we will obviously try and answer them and come back to you. But final one here is, I feel really exhausted lately, but at the same time cannot rest and do nothing because it makes me feel guilty that I should do something. Make use of the time, get ahead to when business resumes. How do I know how much time doing nothing is fine so that I can sit back and enjoy the rest truly? So you used a word in there which I don't know if I mentioned today, but it's a word that I quite often like to bring up, which is the word should. So we really often think we should be doing things. And something I get you to have a little think about is write down all the things that you think you should be doing, and then write down next to them whether or not you want to do them or not. Because we quite often will get expectations from other people, and then we also put expectations on ourselves that we should be doing something. But actually, particularly at the moment, we need to give ourselves that comfort and that compassion towards ourselves that we might try and do something, but actually, if we're not quite in the right headspace right now to do it, it's gonna be more effort. It's gonna be more tiring for us, and actually, it's better for us to maybe park that for a little bit longer, do something else, and then come back to it. So in case of how much time, I can't give you an answer to say, right, 1 hour a day, 5 hours a day, or whatever it is, it's fine. It's what feels right to you. If you're feeling guilty about it, what I'd suggest you do is think about what is it about it you're feeling guilty. Is it that you're putting undue pressure on yourself, or is it that somebody else is putting pressure on you? And I just try to understand that a little bit more about what it is that's making you feel guilty about it.
I think you've put that very well, Laura.
Thanks, James. Okay, what else have we got here? How to feel in confidence if we are always more and more monitored and evaluated based on stats and KPI only. So this is one of those examples where we say that actually the impact of culture on an organisation can have a really big impact on well-being. So if you're in an environment where actually you're being very monitored and focused and it's all KPI driven, then actually that isn't going to feel comfortable for a lot of people culture-wise. Now some people, they might enjoy that because they might like the hard facts behind it and the motivation behind it, but for others that's going to be quite claustrophobic and feel quite uncomfortable with that. So the feeling confidence in there has got to come from within. So whether or not people have put these expectations around you, it's kind of going back to what I just said about the shoulds. If there's expectations around you that you should be achieving certain things, obviously I'm sure there's probably a connection of things like bonuses to that as well. But thinking about, are you comfortable in the job that you do? Are you happy that you are doing the best you can do? And that's where the emotional intelligence that we mentioned earlier comes from, that understanding yourself, understanding you are doing what you are supposed to be doing in that moment, and you're doing the best you can do in that moment. And actually, hopefully, that's where your confidence starts to come from. And there's lots more we can talk about confidence, but I'm conscious of time. So if you do want to talk about confidence a little bit more, reach out, and I'm more than happy to have a chat. But try to focus on do as much as you can do. And, you know, there will be expectations put on you by the people, by clients, by employers, whoever else it is. But always try and think about what's realistic for you to do.
Yeah, I think actually all I would say to add to that is that the word should is such a mean word, really, because what it does is, as you said, Laura, it should leads to expectation. Expectation then leads to resentment towards ourselves and potentially to others, which is just an uncomfortable state of being. And ultimately, we can only do our best, right?
Absolutely. Well, I think if we leave it there, guys, because I'm conscious we're just after 4 o'clock now. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. as I said before, please do reach out if you want to have a chat. Just pick our brains, or just have somebody to chat to and ask how you're doing. Then please do reach out. For anybody that feels like they need a little bit more support and want to speak to somebody confidentially, please use the support line. Even if you don't need it now, pop the number in your phone, because you never know when you're going to need it. And it's far better to have that number in your phone for when you do need it, just in case.
Amazing. Well,
Great,
thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, Laura, and thank you, everybody, and thank you, IBTM.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.